Why was an innocent girl married off to 4 elderly men? The cruelty inflicted by those heartless men on the girl was so severe that it would make anyone's soul tremble. Today's story is a heartbreaking tale of an innocent girl's suffering. If you hear this story, it will surely bring tears to your eyes. This is the tragic account of a 20-year-old girl who endured unspeakable torment. The girl, trembling and crying uncontrollably, managed to reach Sultan Salamat's court. At that time, the court was in session, and the Sultan was listening to the grievances of his subjects. The girl cried so much that she collapsed and lost consciousness before she could say anything. Seeing her collapse, Sultan Salamat stood up, deeply concerned. He wondered what sorrow had brought this girl to such a state. The courtiers present were equally worried upon witnessing her condition. The Sultan immediately ordered his guards to sprinkle water on her face to revive her so they could understand her plight. A Hakim, physician, was summoned promptly. The Hakim checked her pulse and declared that the girl was extremely weak and had fainted due to exhaustion. After some time, she regained consciousness but began crying again. Sultan Salamat gently placed his hand on her head and said, "Do not be afraid, young girl. You are standing in my court, where no injustice will be tolerated. Tell us what troubles you." The Sultan then offered her a seat, and a servant brought her some water. After drinking the water, the girl looked at Sultan Salamat and said, "O Sultan, I have come to you with my tale of sorrow." Tears streamed down her face as she spoke. "O Sultan Salamat, my life is in grave danger. Please save me, or they will tear me apart. For so long I have endured unspeakable oppression." The girl wept bitterly in front of everyone. The entire court fell silent, eager to hear her story. Sultan Salamat gently placed his hand on her head again and said, "Speak, my child, and tell us your story in detail. Let us know what has happened to you." The girl began to recount her sorrowful tale. "O Sultan Salamat, I was just 10 years old when my parents were still together. My mother often cried and told me, 'Your father is an alcoholic. He insults me, beats me, and is not a good man.' At the time, I was too young to understand her words. My parents fought every single day. One day, their argument escalated so much that my father clearly and irrevocably divorced my mother by pronouncing talaq 3 times. From that moment, my mother was no longer his wife. After the divorce, my mother said to me, 'Daughter, I cannot stay here anymore. Your father has divorced me. Let's leave this place and go somewhere else.' She took me with her, but I cried and pleaded, 'Mother, I want to stay with both of you.' My mother replied, 'My dear child, if your father only hurt me or insulted me, I could have endured it. But now he has divorced me. I cannot live with him anymore. Your father is not a good man. Come with me, my child.' The girl continued. My mother then took me to my uncle's house. When we got there, my uncle said, 'Sister, you are welcome to stay with me, but I cannot allow your daughter to stay here. She has grown into a young woman now, and I have 4 grown sons in this house. If anything happens, the villagers will convene a council, and I cannot afford to tarnish my reputation. So, sister, you can stay here, but your daughter cannot.' Hearing this, my mother wept bitterly and said to me, 'My dear daughter, I am helpless. I cannot keep you with me.' My mother then took me back to my father's house and left me there. She went back to live with her brother. I cried when I saw my father. He placed his hand on my head and assured me, 'Do not worry, my daughter. Your father is here for you.' At that moment, I began to feel that perhaps my father wasn't as bad as my mother had described him. But I was a naive and innocent girl, unable to understand the complexities of good and bad. I started living with my father. Over time, I began to notice that late at night, women would visit my father's room. They would lock the door and leave at dawn. I didn't understand what was happening. I was too young and innocent to comprehend anything. In the mornings, as the day began, my father would hand some money to those women, and they would leave. Despite this, my father treated me very kindly. Every day he would ask me, "Daughter, what would you like to eat today? What should we cook?" At that time, I thought my father was kind to me, but I could not understand the bigger picture. Everything seemed unclear to me. Thus, 16 years passed in my father's house. When I turned 16, my father arranged my marriage to one of his friends. This man was much older than me. However, I accepted this without protest, as I believed that a husband is meant to care for his wife, and a wife should respect her husband. I embraced the relationship wholeheartedly, resolving to keep my husband happy, regardless of the age difference between us. After the wedding, my husband took me to his home. 2 days after our marriage, I was cooking when my husband returned from outside. I immediately went to him and asked, "How was your day? Where did you go?" Hearing this, he became furious. He slapped me hard across my face. I was a young and fragile girl, unable to endure such a blow. I broke down into tears, terrified of him and shocked by his reaction. He scolded me harshly, saying, "How dare you question me about where I was?" He added, "I despise wives who interfere in their husbands' lives. Therefore, I am divorcing you." He then pronounced the triple talaq, ending our marriage instantly. "Go back to your father's house," he said. I wept bitterly, questioning myself. What was my crime? Was it wrong for me to ask how his day went or where he had been? I wondered, is this truly such a grave offense? But what could I do? Once he divorced me, I became haram, forbidden to him. Left with no other choice, I returned to my father's house, broken and despondent, crying uncontrollably. I returned to my father's house and told him everything. I said, "My husband has divorced me in this cruel way." My father placed his hand on my head and said, "Daughter, perhaps your husband was not a good man. That's why he divorced you. Allah will hold him accountable for his actions." After saying this, my father walked away. His indifferent behavior deeply hurt me. I couldn't help but think, wasn't it his responsibility to confront that man and ask, "Why did you divorce my daughter?" Still, I chose to remain silent and stayed quietly at my father's house. My father kept repeating, "Your husband wasn't a good person. Allah will deal with him." I stopped paying much attention to these words and focused on my sorrow. In Islam, when a woman is divorced or her husband passes away, she must observe a waiting period of 4 months and 10 days, known as Idat. Once my Idat period ended, 4 months and 10 days later, my father arranged another marriage for me. I clasped my hands in front of him and pleaded, "It's been just 5.5 months since my divorce. I still haven't overcome the pain of losing my first husband. How can I marry again?" But my father ignored my plea. He said, "Not all husbands are the same. You will find happiness with this one." With that, he arranged my second marriage. Moved to my new husband's house. He kept me with him for 3 days, and on the 4th day, he divorced me for no reason. Once again, I was abandoned. Now I carried the stigma of being divorced twice. I returned to my father's house and told him everything, yet he paid no attention to my pain. Once again, I was made to observe the Idat period. After completing the 4 months and 10 days of Idat following my second divorce, my father said, "I have arranged a third marriage for you. You must move forward and build your life." By now, I was so broken by the repeated injustices that I fell to my knees before my father and pleaded, "Father, please forgive me. Save me from these men. Don't marry me off again. I can no longer bear this cruelty. Why are you forcing me into marriage over and over? If I have become a burden to you, then leave me in an orphanage. But Father, I beg you, have mercy on me. These men marry me, take me to their homes, use my body for 2 or 3 days, and then throw me away. If this next man does the same, stays with me for 2 days, and then divorces me, what will I do? Don't ruin my life." I begged my father, but he yelled, in anger, "You must get married, or your fate will be even worse." Hearing such hateful words from my father, I fell silent. What could I do? My father arranged my 3rd marriage and sent me to the house of another man. However, this man was worse than the first 2. I was stunned by his cruelty and wondered how every husband I married was progressively more ruthless. My 3rd husband was not just older but extremely abusive. He would beat me over minor issues, often so severely that blood would drip from my nose and mouth. My nights passed in agony, and my days were filled with tears. I resigned myself to the thought that this suffering was my destiny, that I was born only to endure humiliation. He insulted me constantly, bringing up my previous husbands. He would sneer, "Where did your former husbands touch you?" Afterward, he would burn my skin with hot coals. I would cry and beg him, folding my hands in desperation, "Please don't do this to me. I cannot endure this." I pleaded, but the more I cried, the more his cruelty intensified. I endured this torture for some time until one day he also divorced me with talaq. Now I bore the shame of being divorced 3 times. The young woman recounted this heart-wrenching tale, weeping before Sultan Salamat's court. Everyone present was moved to tears, their eyes filled with sorrow for her plight. Crying, the woman said to the Sultan, "After my 3rd divorce, I returned to my father's house. He immediately began arranging my 4th marriage. It was then that the truth became clear to me. I folded my hands before him and pleaded, 'Please, forgive me. Do not humiliate my life further.' But my father coldly replied, 'I have spent a lot of money raising you. Where else will I recover that money if I don't marry you off?' When my father arranged my 4th marriage to an old man, the truth finally unfolded. The man gave my father 3 pouches filled with goods. At that moment, I realized that my father had made similar transactions during my previous marriages. I understood then that my father had been selling me under the guise of marriage, using my dignity to earn money. When he sent me away for the 4th time, I resolved to come to the Sultan and tell my story. In my first 3 marriages, I had been too naive to see my father's real intentions. By the time I entered into my 4th marriage, I finally understood everything. I realized that my father was selling me off under the guise of marriage. The elderly man I was married to was even more cruel than my previous 3 husbands. He tortured me so much that I felt neither alive nor dead. There was not a single moment of peace in my life. One day, when my endurance reached its limit, I spoke out against him. That very day he divorced me, grabbed my hand and dropped me off at my father's house. Once again, I returned to my father's home. I now fully understood that my father had been selling me under the name of marriage and trading my honor. Before, I was naive and clueless, but now everything was clear to me. Desperate, I went to the Sultan crying and said, "My father now goes as far as inviting men into the house daily to trade my honor. I am destroyed. Oh, Sultan, please help me." Hearing the girl's painful story, the Sultan became furious. He reassured her, "My child, do not worry. We will surely help you." The Sultan then instructed the girl, "Return to your father's house. I will send my minister with you. He will accompany you secretly so that your father remains unaware." The minister returned to the girl's house with her and hid in the room where she stayed. The Sultan also stationed guards outside the house, but no one inside had any knowledge of it. The minister stayed hidden in the girl's room. Later, the girl's father came and said, "Wear these clothes, dress beautifully, and sit here." After some time, a man entered the girl's room and tried to force himself on her. At that moment, the minister emerged from his hiding place. Seeing the minister, the man was shocked and asked, "Who are you?" The minister drew his dagger and struck the man's foot, causing a loud scream to echo from the girl's room. Hearing the scream, the girl's father and the guards outside quickly rushed into the room. Upon entering, the father was stunned to see the minister standing there. The guards captured both the man and the girl's father and brought them, along with the girl, to the Sultan's court. In the royal court, the Sultan sternly demanded answers from everyone. The girl's father confessed to his crimes, admitting that he had subjected his own daughter to immense cruelty. He had handed her over to merciless husbands who abused her and divorced her without reason. The Sultan decreed severe punishments for all the culprits. The girl's father was publicly hanged in the town square, and women were ordered to pelt him with stones until his death. The abusive husbands were thrown into prison without food or water, left to perish from hunger and thirst. Turning to the girl, the Sultan comforted her, saying, "My child, if you wish, you can stay in this palace. Whatever you need, let me know, and I will help you." But upon hearing these words, the girl suddenly collapsed. Royal physicians rushed to her aid and informed the Sultan, "This girl has endured unimaginable suffering. Her wounds run deep. Her survival until now has been a miracle. Despite our best efforts, we could not save her life." The girl breathed her last, leaving everyone in the court in profound grief. The onlookers mourned her, reflecting on how much sorrow and pain she must have concealed within her heart, and how she carried those wounds with her to the grave. Thus the story of this brave girl came to an end. If we compare this to today's times, we still hear news of such horrific incidents that shake our hearts to the core. Somewhere, a 9-year-old child suffers unimaginable torment. Elsewhere, countless innocent people endure injustice. Even today, we witness cruel individuals playing with the dignity of innocent girls without an ounce of shame. This story is from an ancient time, but similar incidents still serve as lessons for us. Friends, I hope today's story has taught you something valuable. If you found it meaningful, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, and continue bringing you more educational and heart-touching stories. Thank you.